Good morning. I'm Carol Thompson Cole, President and CEO of Venture Philanthropy Partners Raise DC. I'm very glad to be welcoming you in person this morning, and we are here gathered for something that's a very critical and extremely timely conversation. Building the future, today, Black excellence in education. Thank you to our investors, board members, partners, friends, guests who are joining us today, both in person and virtually. We are also happy to welcome students from Statesman College Preparatory Academy for boys. I also want to take a moment to thank some of our institutional investors for their invaluable partnership in this work. J.P. Morgan Chase, the James A. and Alice B. Clark Foundation, and Capital One. We cannot thank you enough for your support. VPP+Raise DC's mission is to lead positive systemic change that builds a better future for vulnerable children and youth in Greater Washington. We envision a future where all young people have the opportunity to succeed and contribute to the productivity, health, and well-being of Greater Washington. For over 20 years, we have continuously worked to ensure all young people of this region have the tools to succeed in school and beyond, improving education, health, and career outcomes. We approach systems change with a racial equity lens through cross-sector collaboration and direct investments focused on early childhood, boys and young men of color, and career and college readiness. We've deployed over $110 million to programs and organizations serving over 57,000 children and young adults in our region, and we strive to build bridges between the nonprofit, for-profit, government, and philanthropic sectors in different communities throughout our region. Today, over 200,000 young people in Greater Washington are disconnected from education and employment. And due to COVID-19, this number is increased by over 25% from pre-pandemic days. Every young person should have the opportunity to receive a good education and find a career with life-sustaining wages in the region that we all call home. In 2012 and 2020, VPP+Raise DC's Capital Kids Report provided essential data on the status of underserved children in our region. Consistently and in almost every outcome area, young Black and Latino boys suffer disproportionately with adverse outcomes. They are more likely to drop out of high school and be involved in the criminal justice system. They are more likely to suffer the effects of poverty and less likely to find quality career opportunities with professional advancement. We also know that they suffer from racially charged stereotypes and embedded inequities, and the data reflects the challenges and injustices facing underserved boys and young men of color do not stop at jurisdictional lines. We know that both the ability to read at grade level by the end of the 3rd grade and graduating from high school on time are predictive of future success. In 2019, the most recent year we have regional data available, only 46% of all students were reading on grade level by the end of 3rd grade. And outcomes for boys, Black boys and Latino boys were even more severe. For example, in Alexandria, during the 2018-2019 school year, the 3rd grade English language proficiency rate for African American males was 36%. In Fairfax County, the 3rd grade English language proficiency rate for Latino boys was 38%. In Arlington County, the 3rd grade English language arts proficiency rate for Latino males was 43%. And in Washington, D.C., the 3rd grade English language arts proficiency rate for Black males was 20%. Graduation rates also differ greatly by race, ethnicity, and gender across the region. Region-wide, the four-year graduation rate for white students is 98%. However, for African American students, the graduation rate is 87%. And for Latinx students in our region, the graduation rate is 78%. Latino males have the lowest graduation rate region-wide, as only 74% of Latino males graduate from high school in 4 years. Put another way, 1 out of every 4 Latino males in our region do not graduate high school on time. VPP+Raise DC believes that changing outcomes for these young men and their families requires a regional approach and coordination across sectors, driving both systems change and increased capacity for direct services to vulnerable populations. We recognize the complex, specific systemic impediments that boys and young men of color face in navigating their path to successful adulthood, and we commit to supporting the families, organizations, and communities that nurture and strengthen their ability to navigate through such impediments while working to remove the barriers. To the students with us this morning, I want you to know I grew up here in Washington, D.C., and just like you, I was exposed to very successful people, just like you are, and I hope that you feel that we are all here to support you, and you know that you can be successful, find a fulfilling career, and thrive in adulthood. And I'll tell you, we met several of these young men before coming in, and they already have dreams, and they've already started businesses. So we know we have a successful group of young men here today. With the unprecedented impact of the pandemic, along with the structural racism and implicit biases that enforce the status quo, it is imperative that we act boldly now. It is now more important than ever to invest today in our youth who will be our leaders of tomorrow. The Greater Washington region is home to 6 Black male college and university presidents, an unprecedented number, and we are thrilled to have several of them with us on the stage today. Ron Mason Jr., President of University of the District of Columbia, Dr. Gregory Washington, President of George Mason University. Unfortunately, Dr. Gregory Fowler, President of the University of Maryland Global Campus, is unable to be with us due to a scheduling emergency, but we are pleased to welcome Dr. Blair Hayes, Ombudsman and Vice President and Chief Diversity Officer at the University of Maryland Global Campus. And Dr. Wayne Frederick, President of Howard University, is also unable to be with us today due to a death in the family. We send out condolences to him and his family, but we are grateful to be joined by Dr. K. Wutoh, Provost and Chief Academic Officer of Howard University, in his place. Thank you for joining us on such short notice. I'd also like to introduce to you Dr. Jermaine Williams. Will you please stand? He's the newly appointed president of Montgomery College. He's been on the job for just 2 weeks, but we wanted to introduce him to our community, but we'll have him join us at another time on a program. So thank you and welcome to our community. We're also grateful to be joined by Keith Alexander, our moderator today, a proud Howard alumnus and a Pulitzer Prize-winning reporter for the Washington Post. We are proud to host this esteemed group in an in-depth conversation about the challenges and opportunities to improving the college readiness of boys and young men of color in our region and increasing the number of young men of color who are successful at college in their careers and will thrive throughout adult life. So I'd like to thank Dr. Frederick and Howard University for hosting us today, and for Paul Montero, Chief of Staff and Assistant Vice President of External Affairs, for the invaluable help in putting this program together. So with that, Keith, I'll turn it over to you.
All right, thank you so much. Good morning, everyone. Good morning. It was interesting, Ms. Cole said, Dr. Keith Alexander. I'm the only one up here without a PhD. That was quite obvious to me when I agreed to do this, but that's all right. I'm gonna still try to represent as best I can. Welcome and thank you, panelists and guests, for joining us this morning. And thank you, my alma mater, Howard University, for hosting this exciting and very interesting conversation. As a matter of fact, when I was a student here at Howard just a few years ago, I was in this room twice a week from my freshman year to my senior year for rehearsals. I was in the gospel choir, and we rehearsed in this room from 7 a.m. to 9 p.m. twice a week, every week. And so this room brings back memories. I haven't been back here since, so a little flashback here. The greater Washington region is home to a historic number of black male college university presidents, a total of 6, which has already been said. Leading George Mason University, Howard University, Montgomery College, University of the District of Columbia, University of Maryland College Park, and the University of Maryland Global Campus. This is both unprecedented and significant. We are excited to assemble this brilliant brain trust for a conversation about the challenges faced by both young black and Latino men in our region and the opportunities that exist to improve their experience as they transition to college and careers. Throughout today's conversation, I challenge everyone in this room to think about how we can take action, great or small, to improve the outcomes for black and Latino Hispanic boys in the greater Washington region. So first, let's begin the conversation. I'd like to start off by asking each of you to share a transformational moment, if you will, or a person in your own life that was pivotal to each of your successes. We'll start with you, sir.
Sure, yeah, happy to do it.
Yes.
Well, first let me say thank you for having me today. I'm really happy to be filling in for Dr. Fowler. He would love to be here, but we always say that he's a Morehouse man, I'm a Morehouse man. So you do have a Morehouse man, just not the one you thought you were going to get. But really happy to be here, and obviously being at Howard, I'm from Washington, D.C., and this is a special place to me and my family as well. So I'm really happy to be here. You know, there's so much, when that question, when I think about how did I get to where I am now and where I want to go, it starts in the home. Obviously, my parents were big supporters and helping to foster a belief in myself. When I think about professionally, I think back to my experience at Morehouse College, and there was a chair of the psychology department. And as I was trying to figure out what I was going to do with my life and figure out what opportunities might be in front of me, there was a research project that he was doing. And one day I said, I'd like to be a part of your research team. What can I do to help? And he sat me down and he said, well, I don't want you to be a part of the research team. I want you to lead the research team. And so I think having people who believe in you and believe in me and helped me see bigger than even I saw for myself allowed me to think beyond just what I was thinking about that day. And then I said, okay, well, if I can do this, I can do more. And so in leading that team, I was able to bring together a group of other colleagues and build a research team. We went out around Atlanta in some of the developing communities, worked with families there to think about what their needs were, what resources they needed to further their own development and their financial stability, talk to kids in the neighborhoods. And that led me to look at myself differently and look at the change and impact I can make in my own community. And so I think it all starts by just having someone who believes in you. And so I don't know if I said his name was Dr. Harold Braithwaite. He was the chair of the psychology department, and I've always remembered that conversation and never sold myself short after that time. And I always thought, if I can do this, I can do even more. So I think that was an important lesson for me.
Thank you, Dr. Hayes. Doctor?
Yes, sir. First of all, thank you all. Thank you for having me, VPP. Thank you, Howard, for allowing us to be a guest here. I guess the first thing I can think of that was significant in my life was when I got on the airplane for the first time to go away to college. I grew up in New Orleans. We didn't have a lot of money. And so when I went to Columbia University, it opened up my eyes to a world that I didn't even know existed. And my life has not been the same since. As far as people who have influenced me, when I finished law school, I went and worked with a priest who ran a company called Southern Cooperative Development Fund. And we organized low-income cooperatives across the South. It opened up my eyes to a world that I had not known. Then while I was there, I met a guy named David Dennis, who was a civil rights leader, and introduced me to all of the civil rights folks from his era, and I learned a lot from him. And then the third was a guy named Eamon Kelly, who was a backroom Irish politician that was also president of Tulane University. And I've worked with him for 17 years as general counsel at Tulane, and between the three of those, I think I ended up being the person I am today.
Okay. Yes, sir.
Well, first and foremost, thank you all for inviting me here and giving me the opportunity to engage with all of you today. And thank you, Howard, for allowing us to be here. For me, it actually began with a choice. When I was 12 years old in New York City, I witnessed my first drug deal. And it was with my best friend who was actually making that deal. I'm standing right beside him, and he was selling single joints for $1 a piece and dime and nickel bags. Somebody here know what I'm talking about. I'm not gonna go into detail. And he asked me at that time, he said, "You want to get down with this?" And it was a pivotal moment for me because I looked up to him. At that point in time, when we were 12 years old, he was smarter than me. He was faster than me. He was stronger than me. And I said, "No, I don't want to do that." And he went on to become one of the largest drug dealers in New York City. And now is in prison serving a life sentence for drug dealing and racketeering. And I took a different path. The second piece was along the journey of that path, I came in contact with, I went to a college prep session when I was in high school. And there was an African-American couple who, for whatever reason, was only 2 or 3 black kids in that group, saw something in me and pulled me aside and just sat with me and said, "You need to keep pursuing. You say you like mathematics and science. You need to go on, go to state, become an engineer, and do great things with your life." And they kept up with me all throughout my time in high school and even throughout my time in college. And those two entities were just so pivotal in my life and helping me move forward.
And before we go into, you answer that question, well, sir, I am a journalist, so hold on to your seats because I do hear follow-up questions immediately. You were 12 years old.
Yes, sir.
Asked you to sell drugs. You said no. Why'd you say no?
Man, my mother would have killed me if she called me.
I just wanted to give somebody a shout out. There you go. Okay. All right. I was wondering why. Okay. All right. Dr. Sir, thank you very much. You can answer the same question.
Thank you. Good morning and welcome to Howard University. First, I want to thank each of you for being here, and then also to offer our thoughts and prayers to President Frederick, whose family is mourning the loss of his stepfather today. And as I think about the question, several names come to mind of individuals who were really influential in my life, and certainly at the top of the list would be my parents, my mom, Valerie Wutoh, and more particularly my father, Joseph Wutoh. My family emigrated from Ghana when I was young, and my father ended up at the University of Maryland, Eastern Shore, where he was a professor and taught biology and genetics. And I remember as a young kid going to his lab and going to his classrooms and seeing him interact with students. And I remember as a kid, my father told us everyone in his house is going to do science. And science was not my strongest subject. I ended up getting a biochemistry degree from University of Maryland, Baltimore County, and going to pharmacy school and graduate school. My strongest subjects were actually history and English. But I always remember my father's admonishment, advice, and so I pursued science, and as I was graduating from pharmacy school and then finishing my PhD, my plan was to go and work in the pharmaceutical industry. But I also remember my dad interacting with colleagues at Howard and teaching. And so when I learned that there was a faculty position available at Howard, it was really an homage to my father that I decided, well, I'll come to Howard for about 5 years and then go into pharmaceutical industry and pay off my school loans. And that was 26 years ago. So I really have to attribute that, one, to my father, who was that pivotal influence in my life, and my mother as well. And I think also about one of my professors in pharmacy school, Bob Beardsley, who was the associate dean in our pharmacy school, and encouraged me as a pharmacy student to consider graduate school. And he ended up serving as my dissertation advisor as I was pursuing my PhD, made sure I had the opportunity to pursue HIV research, which really was the foundation of my research career. And so I really think about those three individuals in terms of the influence they had on me pursuing a career in academia, and then looking in the same way that my father did, the same way he had the influence on the students that he interacted with, to see the way that I could contribute in a similar way in my career.
Okay. All right, thank you for that. Let's talk about what you all think it takes or will take to ensure that young black men, young Hispanic men are prepared for college and for a career. Dr. Washington, if we can start with you.
Well, I think we have to realize first and foremost that we have a crisis of opportunity in the country. Look, the reality is having 6 black male presidents in this region is a tremendous accomplishment, and the region should be commended for doing it. It does not mean that we have arrived. There is still a crisis of opportunity in the country, and many black and brown youth are not getting those opportunities. And so, first and foremost, we have to recognize that there is an opportunity challenge. And there are a host of statistics that outline and highlight that. Once that is recognized, we need to look for ways to differentially give opportunity to youth and position them so that they can be successful on the back end. This is why I love having these young brothers here, having them in these programs. We need to connect them with institutions like ours, connect them early, have them engage with institutions like ours, and connect them with faculty who are going to give them engagement, but also on the back end are going to give them opportunity, scholarships, resources, training, so that they can actually be successful on the back end.
Dr. Mason.
Yeah, I'll say it a little differently, but more or less the same. We assume that at birth, talent is not distributed based on race or social status. But when at the end of the talent production pipeline, 80% of the wealth is owned by 10% of the population and 90% of that 10% is white, it's pretty clear that it's a rigged competition. And in a rigged competition, 2 things have to happen. One, over time, your talent gets to be more and more mediocre because it's not competing against the best talent. But also you have to eliminate talent to make sure that it doesn't compete in a rigged competition. And so in order for our young men who are blessed with as much talent as anyone else at birth to be able to reach their highest levels of potential, we have to first understand what we're up against, and then second, make sure that we enable America to reach a level of enlightened self-interest, because it doesn't make any sense to keep complaining about not being able to find talent when you're committed to a system that is itself designed to eliminate the talent you're trying to find. And so when the opportunities are opened up because people understand that they need the talent, which is what gives me hope, then we'll be able to enable our young men to reach their highest levels of potential which is what America ultimately needs.
Dr. Wutoh?
And I'm in agreement with both of those comments, but I also believe that because the problem we're facing is multidimensional, that we need a multifaceted approach as well. I'm a strong believer in mentoring. I remember when I finished pharmacy school, I was asked to participate in a mentoring program with Baltimore City Schools, and I was assigned to mentor two young men, Carlos and Craig. And they both were from inner city neighborhoods in Baltimore, were doing marginally well in school, and neither of them had a father figure at home. So I agree, I had no idea what I was doing, but because I had such a strong influence, both from my father and also from mentors that helped to steer me as a young man, I agreed, and I would talk with them almost on a daily basis. I took them to visit various schools and colleges because I wanted them to get in a mindset of this is where you can go and this is where you should be looking to achieve. And I was so glad. One of them actually dropped out of high school. I was able to, over time, and primarily his mom, but also in conversations, convinced him to get his GRE. Carlos ended up was a basketball player, went to Johnson C. Smith, blew out his knee his freshman year, but stayed with it. He graduated from college and called me one day and said, I'm thinking about going to law school. So certainly had a conversation with him, encouraged him, told him whatever I could, if I needed to pay your deposit, I would do that. He ended up graduating from law school. And I remember meeting with him probably 10 or 15 years later with his fiancée at the time and making a comment to her about how much of an influence his relationship with me had been. And again, at the time, I just thought, we would talk on occasion, I would hang out with them, and just never fully appreciated that the conversations we were having, the experiences that I was sharing with him, instilling in him, you can go to college, you can do anything you want to do. He was sharing with his wife how much that had in terms of him pursuing those opportunities. So certainly we have to make structural changes. We have to continue to create opportunities for these young men. But I also believe in mentoring and other ways that we can have a one-on-one direct influence in their lives.
Okay. So mentoring. And Dr. Hayes?
Yeah, I think I concur with everything that my colleagues up here said, but I will add that, too often I think we are pushing these young men down pathways and into systems that have failed them historically throughout all of our lives. And so to push them down pathways that we know might not serve them, might not be the best for them, right? And so we have to look at what are other ways to get the end results that we're looking for beyond just trying to say you have to be a part of systems that don't serve you well. And so, what I think we need to do is we need to redefine what success might be for some kids. It doesn't always end up in a college pathway. Success might mean entrepreneurial pursuits. It might mean that you are a community activist, but you're not going through the college systems. I'm a big proponent of college. College has served me well, but sometimes when we have those individuals and those young men who don't go that pathway, they are looked at as failures, right? And that can leave mental lingering detriments. That can be detrimental to their mental health, right? The scars. And so I think what we need to do and I think it was already mentioned, but we need to take care of them, their education, but we also have to early on start looking at mental health, financial health and stability. All those things are what makes a well-rounded person. And so we need to be taking care of the whole child, the whole individual, and these young men, so that when they do get out into what they call the real world, right, they are ready for everything that they're going to be confronted with. Because oftentimes there's a whole world out there that might not be looking to support them. And so we need to, while we have our arms around them, we need to take care of them.
Thank you for that. The question comes to my mind. I cover crime in courts for the Washington Post. And I see young boys coming to the juvenile system charged with a variety of crimes. So I'm curious. I mean, I'm not worried about these young brothers right here. They won't be all right. I already see that right now. I'm worried about those young brothers who are coming to the courts, who may not already be in a program, linked up with a mentor.
Right.
What are your institutions doing to go after and reach those young men? If anything. Don't everyone all jump in at once. I know that was unscripted, but that's what you get when you get a Washington Post reporter up here. So, but you all got PhDs, I don't, so y'all can speak on your feet. Who wants to take it first?
I'll jump in.
All right, thank you.
So UDC is a little different. You know, we're the only public university in the district. We're the most affordable, but also the best way to understand us is if you take an entire state system of higher education and put it into one compact package. And what I'm saying is this, that we do workforce certification, we do associate's degrees, we do bachelor's and above, and we can reach everyone wherever they are in whatever circumstance they find themselves, right? And so, for example, in Southeast, in Ward 8, we have an initiative called DAWN, Developing America's Workforce Nucleus. And so we're focused on connecting the higher education component of education to the K-12 system, but also while we're working with the students in the K-12 system, we can work with their parents in our workforce development program. And you know, UDC used to have a really fantastic program with the local incarcerated citizens here called Lorman. I don't know if it was gone before I got here, but I've met many people who have gone through that program and come out and done pretty well in life. In fact, one of them was my assistant at UDC who got his bachelor's in business.
But that program no longer exists.
It no longer exists because they send, now if you get arrested in Washington, they send you all over the country and not, you're not here anymore, right, exactly. And so, you know, our strategic plan is called the Equity Imperative because we're designing an institution that not only can serve everyone wherever they are, but also because this struggle that we're in has to go on beyond any of our lifetime. We need an institution that can do that work over time because it's a generational challenge that we have to address.
Dr. Wutoh, what is Howard doing?
We're doing a number of things. One of the things that comes to mind, we have a faculty member, Dr. Bahia Muhammad, who's created a program in partnership with DC Corrections where we have Howard students who will go into correctional institutions and actually take courses with brothers who are incarcerated. Giving them an opportunity to earn college credit, but also giving our students the opportunity to see what is the impact of the criminal justice system and what things we can do to help influence change in a positive way. And so, you know, we're continuing to consider initiatives like that, not just what things we can do from a policy perspective, but what actual practical things can we do to help make sure that brothers get skills and that they have the opportunity for reentry into society and they have the opportunity to pursue a college degree or vocational training or some other route that will give them a productive outcome.
Dr. Washington, what about you? Particularly kids who aren't in the system yet, who,
No.
or who might be at risk of being in the system.
Right. Well, first and foremost, do you all recognize that universities in general cut off opportunity for people who have criminal record? We actually, many institutions in this region will not allow you to even apply. You can apply, but they will not process your application if you have a criminal record.
Is George Mason one of them?
George Mason is not one of them.
Okay.
And so we removed that entity. We call it, it's a box that you literally check.
Oh, the box.
And so we got rid of the box, okay? And the reality is we still want to know if you've had any type of criminal, because there's some majors that you just can't get the proper credentials in if you've had a criminal record, right? And we want to steer students away from those majors and steer them into other majors that they can go and be successful in. And so that
I'm
was,
sorry, does that include juvenile records which are sealed?
it's, I don't know the answer to that question.
All right.
So yeah,
Okay.
I don't know if it's sealed or unsealed, but I know it has been a problem for a significant number of individuals who are of college age who are applying to universities. So that was for us, that's the big one. The other thing is that we have opened up our admissions process to provide opportunities for just about everyone who applies. So we're now admitting somewhere in the neighborhood of 90% of the individuals who apply to Mason. And we're graduating more than 70% of the African American and Latino students who actually apply, right? And which is unheard of at institutions, large public institutions in our region. And so the idea is we get you in, we find a place for you, and we get you out. And that is what you want an academic institution to do.
And Dr. Harris?
Yeah, I will just add, we are a non-traditional university. We are primarily online. And so the students that we serve are usually non-traditional. They're adult learners. And so what that allows is to remove some of those barriers that exist when, whether it's financial barriers, because if you're working online, you can have a job full time, right? But you can also get education in the evenings, right? And so you can still be furthering your careers. And so what I think that allows is for a returning citizen to get employment, which they need in order to meet their probationary status, but also pursue an education that can further their career going forward. And so, while the programs that we have don't necessarily reach out to the K through 12 space, because we're working with adult learners primarily, but I think the online learning provides a unique opportunities for these students to continue to develop credentials, develop pathways to future career success. And so I think that's how we're tapping into these communities and through partnerships with community colleges and other institutions as well that are serving those individuals.
And what about financial opportunity, like financial aid and things of that nature? Because often, a lot of times these young men would like to attend college.
Right.
They have the desire, but they don't have the finances.
That's right.
And they really don't even have the grades, but they have the desire.
That's right.
So what are your institutions doing to ensure that if you have the desire, even though you have the money or the grades, but you have the desire, we want to work with you? Anyone feel free to jump in on that one.
Well, I can just continue. I think one of the programs that we have is called our 3D Scholars Program, and it's for students in Prince George's County. But you can get into this pathway starting in high school that feeds you into an associate's degree with Prince George's Community College, and then you get a bachelor's degree from University of Maryland Global Campus, all for $10,000.
What is it called again? What's the program
The
called?
3D Scholars Program. 3D Scholars Program. 3 degrees for scholars. And so that to get 3 different degrees, you get your high school, you get your associates, and your bachelor's, all for $10,000. And that is unprecedented given the cost of college nowadays. And so what we're trying to do is get those high school students to see that there's a pathway all the way through, and that we support you and mentor you throughout that process. As was mentioned before, it's not just the educational piece, but the mentoring is also important to have that connection and for someone to see something in you and instill that in you. And so that's one of those programs that reduces the cost, but also supports and nurtures those individuals from very early on.
Awesome. Yes, sir.
We're a beautiful university when it comes to affordability. Our workforce certification programs are free to every district resident. Our open admissions door, which we brand as a community college, is priced so that if you are Pell Grant eligible, it's basically free. And then if you're a resident in the bachelor's program, it's about $7,000 a year. And this year, with the federal funds, we were able to provide a free ride to anyone who was in need, as well as buy books and a device and a few other things this year. And then if you're a DC high school graduate with a 3.0 or above, you get a scholarship to come to UDC.
A full scholarship?
If you're a 3.7 and above, it's a full scholarship and a housing subsidy. And so it graduates up from 3.0 and above. We are the people's university, and we like it that way.
Oh, that got a round of applause. Gentlemen, yes, Howard and George Mason.
So for us, we have put in place a transfer pathway program that we call the Mason Virginia Promise. And what that does is, it's a pathway towards a degree or your own business for anyone who wants it. And we manage, there are 27 small business development centers in the state of Virginia. All of them are managed by George Mason. So if you don't want to get an advanced degree, you don't want to get a bachelor's degree, we'll help you start your own business. And so we have that mechanism in place. For those individuals who go through our community college pathway program, which we have established, now we have more than 3,000 students in that program, primarily with Northern Virginia Community College, but we have now extended it to Germanna, Lord Fairfax. We're looking at others to expand it to. We want to be able to couple with most of the community colleges in our region. And the idea here is you do 2 years at a community college, and then you do 2 years at Mason, and you get your associate's degree from the community college in your 4-year. When you get your, and so the question is, what is the cost for the 2 years at Mason? It's based on your income. And so the goal here, our program is we cover 100% of your need. So if you're a Pell Grant recipient and you come in that program, 100% of your need is probably going to be zero. So you wouldn't pay, right? Now, if, you know, Wutoh's kids come through the program, you got to pay full price, right? That's kind of how the mechanism works, and we think it's programs like these. Again, this is about providing opportunity, and it's about providing opportunity regardless of where you are in your stature. You know, they're the people university, and I get that. I love that mechanism. We want to be your ultimate point B university. And what that means is we don't care where point A is. We're going to get you to point B. Point B could be your own business, and point B could be a degree, but we're going to get you there.
And Dr. Wutoh, what's going on at Howard?
As I look at our panel assembled this morning, Howard is the only private institution represented, but even among private institutions in the DC region, we have probably among the most affordable tuitions. But we're doing a number of things to support students, and you know, as we think about and talk about Pell Grant students, for example, we offer and we provide a grace grant to students who matching their Pell Grant. We also have a significant scholarship program. We provide over $100 million in institutional aid to support students, particularly based on need. So we have scholarship support that we provide based on academic merit, but also are shifting a more significant proportion of our scholarship funds to need-based funds. And so the greater the financial need, the more funding we're able to provide to students, and we believe that that's something we want to do. One of President Frederick's visions and goals is for a student who has zero expected family contribution, for us to be able to one day provide all of their need and to be able to fund their scholarships. And we're going to be able to do that with support of donors and alums who are contributing to make sure that we can support the neediest students financially.
Just a yes or no, I'm curious as to, are there any of the universities here represented that have a relationship with any of the high schools over in Southeast, about Lou or Anacostia? Okay, just one. Okay.
I'm not sure.
Okay, not
I'm
sure.
not sure.
Not sure, okay. All right. Let's talk a little bit about what gives you hope. What are you all seeing in young people today, young Black and Hispanic males, that gives you hope for the future? And Dr. Wutoh, we'll start with you.
You know, we met these young men just before we entered today, and it really struck for me the reason why I'm here. One of them had mentioned that he's already started a business and is doing a number of things, to help prepare him for college. And another one had mentioned that he has an interest in archaeology. Another one says that his interest is in math and business. And it really just reminded me that, all of our young people have goals and dreams. Sure. And if we take the time to listen to them, to help to guide them, to direct them, and invest in their goals and dreams, they can achieve any manner of success that any other group can. And so it's a matter of investing in the things that they're interested in pursuing that will help lead them to a successful outcome. And it just took 5 minutes to listen to them, how confidently they introduced themselves, shook our hands. Each of them mentioned what they were interested in doing, and it spanned a wide range of interests. But they give me hope. Mm-hmm. And they certainly, while we deal with a number of challenges, and we're going to continue to, we have to invest in our young people.
Okay. Yes, sir. Right on the ground.
So, they're the most altruistic group of Americans that we've ever seen. They actually believe they can change the world. And I believe that they're going to be able to solve many of the problems that we created for them. Two, they have access to more information and more tools than we ever could have imagined or dreamed of. And three, their barriers for success are actually less than many of the barriers that we had. If I were to outline to you, ask you the question, what does Google, Apple, Facebook, Dell Computer, EA Sports, Netscape all have in common? You say, well, they're tech companies. Yeah, but not necessarily. That's not the one thing. The thing that they all have in common is that they were all started by individuals in their teens or 20s. And they're some of the most successful companies today. There is absolutely no reason why these youth or other youth like them could not establish and develop the next Google, the next Facebook, the next Apple. Our job is to, believe in them and to position them such that they will be able to do that. That is why I pursued science, technology, engineering, and mathematics as a profession. And that is why I'm committed myself to helping our youth get in that profession and get outcomes that actually enable them to do just that. And we're well on our way. We have a number of folk who are doing great things in this space. And I believe we're going to see many more.
Dr. Mason.
Well, I'm sitting on the stage with a pharmacist, an engineer, a Pulitzer Prize winner, a lawyer, and a Morehouse man. But it's not just that we are an example, but also we are in it and trying not to be of it.
That's right. Say that one more time.
We are in it and trying not to be of it. Now, it's a challenge because, we all have institutions to run, we all have to raise money, and sometimes we have to use code words to say what we really want to say. But there is hope here, and there's even more hope there when you look in the eyes and you still see the gleam of potential in young people that have for decades been stifled. That's the one thing that gives me hope. The other thing is this, though. America, I read an article this morning that said that the lack of diversity in America's corporations is costing us hundreds of trillions of dollars a year. And in a nation that is supposed to be of, by, and for all people, diversity is our greatest strength. And America really does need the talent. And most of the talent is in the black, brown, and disadvantaged reserves, these vast reserves of talent that America has not understood how to identify and refine and put into productive use. And I think it's that need for talent that really is, besides the potential, that I think is going to drive America's need to open up the competition and make it be less rigged than it has been for the course of the last 400 years.
Yeah, I'll just add to that. Well, for me, I have 2 black boys at home, 10 and 7, and so I look at them every day and I see the confidence that they walk into a room with, and I think oftentimes we stifle that confidence, right? And I think we need to do more to promote that confidence and make sure that that light does not go out. And so, again, talking to these young men here this morning, they came into the room and they owned it. They owned that room. And then they said, this is what I'm going to do, and kind of looked at us like, how are you going to help me get there? And so I think...
How do we stifle that confidence? Obviously, no one's trying to do it on purpose, but how is it done?
I think oftentimes it's this, wait your turn. It's not time yet, right? Where they're saying, no, I'm going to do this now. I'm not waiting anymore. And so oftentimes I think many of us were told, okay, well, you have to go wait in line, right? And then when it's your turn, you'll get an opportunity. Where they're saying, I'm going to find this opportunity. I'm doing this now. And so we need to say, okay, we're going along with you on this journey. We're going to help get you there. I think, again, not trying to push them down traditional pathways, but say, you're going to chart your own course. We will go along with you on this ride. And so, I think just the confidence and that gleam was mentioned in their eye, I never want to see that go out. And a lot of times we tell these young men and young women, well, that's not unreal. That's unrealistic. That's not possible. Where we have to flip that conversation and say, okay, well, how are you going to do it? Like, okay, that's what you want to do. We're going to help get you there. And so I'm just encouraged because I think there are dreamers out there, and those dreamers, we need them because they're going to change the way that they're going to change the world. And so I think this entrepreneurial spirit and this community spirit as well is something that is very much needed, and this young generation is going to get us there. And again, they're not going to wait. They're not going to wait for us.
And if I could add, because you said something that I think is really important in terms of how do we stifle. Oftentimes we stifle in our minds, we think out of love, but it's really out of fear. What you can't do and what you shouldn't do, as opposed to the unlimited potential and encouraging them to do the things that they do have the talent to do. And again, we oftentimes convince ourselves, particularly with young black men, because we're afraid for them, don't do this, don't do it that way, don't say this, that's unrealistic, don't speak up, as opposed to you have potential to be and do whatever you want to do. Let's figure out how to help you do that, as opposed to keeping you down because we're afraid.
Interesting, yeah. Sound like a Morehouse man over there. That's for sure. We have some questions in the audience. We'll definitely want to give, I think there's a young brother, somebody have a question, if they come up and state their names. And while they're coming up, I want to have my cousin stand up. I see him back there. I think I see him back there. Mr. Phillip Cook, football player. Come on in. 4.0, freshman year on the football team. It's coming in a little late because he had an 8 o'clock class. I was like, who takes 8 o'clock class in college? But this young, the one who has 4.0s and on the football team. I'm so proud of this young brother. Yes. If you could come up and state your name and what your question is, sir.
Hi, I'm Israel Bell. I am in the 6th grade, and I'm a scholar at Statesman College Preparatory Academy for Boys, and thank you for having us. One day, I want to be the president of Harvard University.
All right. Say that one more time, my brother. Say that one more time.
One day, I want to be the president of Howard University.
All right.
Not yet. Don't worry. You can keep your job a little bit longer. How does the job of being the president of a university different from the job of being the president of a company like Amazon or Netflix?
Who would like to jump in on that question first?
So I sit on a board of a number of companies, and so I get to engage with CEOs of large companies like the ones you mentioned, and then obviously I'm a university president. the biggest difference is that we produce a different product. At the end of the day, we're producing knowledge and talent. And the knowledge part is different and varied. Sometimes that knowledge makes money, sometimes it doesn't. It just changes lives. The talent piece is what separates us. We're producing the talent that will lead our country and move that forward. And so the product is the biggest difference. Outside of that, the systems are the same, right? We have logistics systems, we have human resource systems, we have to manage food and housing, and you know, you're managing large numbers of people in multi-level organizations. All of us have to do all of that. All of those aspects are exactly the same. We all got crazy people that we have to deal with and manage. It's just that those outcomes that are different.
Anyone else real quick? 'Cause I have a follow-up question to that young brother's question. Of course I do. Anyone else real quick?
I would just add that in universities you have lifetime employees. It's called tenure, and
You love it, don't you? You just love that, don't you?
and so sometimes you can't move as quickly as you'd like to.
I want to piggyback on the young brother's question. Black men as presidents of the university, got to ask the question. Do you think you are facing different challenges as president of the institutions than non-black counterparts?
I'm gonna let my brother from UDC take that one.
Oh, we'll come back to you, though.
Take that
We'll
one
come back
first.
to you.
Well, I'll say this. When I was at Tulane University, which is a large white institution, the largest employer in New Orleans, I was the number 2 guy there, and I was the first and last black senior official at Tulane University. And when we were there, it was as diverse a white school as you've ever seen. I went back 15 years later to teach a class, and it was like I was never there. And so I say that to say, I'm not sure what I'm trying to say. So if you work at a HBCU, other than Howard, because Howard's a little different, HBCUs are institutional reflections of black people in America, in the sense that we suffer from the cumulative effect of the lack of access to wealth over time. Mm-hmm. And so in that sense, it's a labor of love, but it is a much more difficult labor because of the work we choose to do. And so, what was your question again?
My question is, do you think that you are treated differently or you have different challenges than non-black college presidents?
Yeah, I think if you work at an HBCU, the challenge of not only being black in America, but also working at an institution that is a reflection of black people in America makes it a labor of love, but a labor that is much harder than it would otherwise be.
Thank you. And what about George Mason?
No, look, the reality is it's different. Let's not beat around the bush. It's different. Being president of the United States was different for Barack Obama, right? Okay, and so the reality is that we have to do all the things that a president of any race would have to do, right? And then on top of that, you have to recognize and understand that you represent a class of individuals who have been marginalized for so long and that have needs. And you're in a position of responsibility, and being in that position of responsibility, there is a price. For lack of a better way of putting this, I understand that being in this position was paid for by a price. It was paid for with the blood of our ancestors. It was paid for with individuals marching in streets and positioning themselves to have some level of equity that will provide an opportunity for me to get there. And while I'm sitting in the seat, my responsibility is to provide opportunity for others who may not have gotten that chance with someone who doesn't look like me sitting in the seat. And I recognize that. And the reality is, look, if things are not improving for people of color during my watch at George Mason University, under my watch, why would I expect it to, improve with somebody else, right? It is a core responsibility that every leader of color has to the organizations that they represent.
Are you the first black president of George Mason?
Yes, sir.
The first black president of George Mason.
Hopefully we won't do a two-lane, and I won't be the only.
Yes, young brother, come to the mic and state your name.
Well, my name is Kai Corbett. I'm in the 7th grade, and I go to Statesman College Preparatory Academy for Boys. My question is, though, I won't take your job. When I grow up, I want to be a video game designer. I know some of my peers will. And for their sake, what are the 3 things they have to know to be like you, to experience the success that you have?
3 things.
3 things.
I'll start, and this is something that I have two daughters. One of them is a sophomore here at Howard, and one of the things that my father instilled in us that I tried to instill in them is to always do your best the first time, and what I share with them is that you want to do your best the first time because you don't want to have regrets that it could have been better. I could have been successful if I had tried a little harder. And so if you do your best the first time, both in terms of your greater likelihood of success, I don't like having regrets. And so I don't want to think, well, gee, if I had studied a little bit more for that exam, if I had given a little bit more effort in this project that we're trying to accomplish. So that's one bit of advice that I would give. If you do your best, you never have to look back and say, well, I want to make sure that if we're not successful, it's not my fault. I did everything that I could possibly have done.
Absolutely. Anyone else?
Sure. Yeah, I'll jump in there. I would just say never stop learning. As mentioned here, we have PhDs and lawyers and everything, but we are all still learning. And there's never a point where you have learned enough because there's always going to be something new that's coming in new fields, new industries. And so I think you always need to continue learning. I think the other thing you always need to do is think about what value you add, whether it's what value you add to your friendships, what value you add to when you start your video game company, right, to your colleagues. But always be able to describe and go in there knowing you bring value and you know your worth and never sell yourself short.
So I would say always show up, because showing up is half the battle. Never let anybody outwork you.
That's right.
And I'll share with you what I tell to every incoming class and every graduating class at UDC. Remember, yesterday is only a memory and tomorrow is only a vision. It's what you do with today that will say whether yesterday is a memory of happiness and tomorrow is a vision of hope. So always do the best you can with each and every day.
There is absolutely not much I can add to what was just said here. Look, the reality is, for me, so I played football growing up, had a tremendous injury that kept me, that caused me to lose college scholarships. But I was a good student. And note for you, brother. I was a good student. And when I couldn't play football anymore, I was able to shift, right? And I treated life that way. Always have multiple options. Always, don't put all your eggs in one basket, because you don't know when that basket is going to get taken away, right? An old man told me he told me, he said, I asked him, well, what do I need to have to be, I asked him, what was it going to take in order for me to be successful? And he told me, whatever it is you don't have. And so you better have it all. And what that meant for me was work towards having multiple pathways to success, right? Have the attitude that nothing is going to stop me. This avenue might be cut off, but if you block this door, I'm going to create another door over here. And if you block that one, I'm going through that wall right there, but I'm going to be successful.
I'm just going to throw one more thing here. I'm not a college president, but I would encourage you to find somebody who's doing exactly what you want to do. Reach out to them. Know their name, their email address, and say, hello, my name is so-and-so, and I want to do what you're doing. Can you go have coffee? Can you tell me how you got to where you are? It's called finding a mentor. When I was 16, that's what I did. I was always interested in journalism, and I reached out to journalists at the Pittsburgh Press then, and got a job as a copy aide at the Pittsburgh Press. I reached out to people who were doing exactly what I wanted to do. So that's what you should be doing. You should be identifying grown folk, adults who are doing exactly what you want to do, and be reaching out to them. And keep reaching out to them, and keep reaching out to them, because somebody's going to actually return your email and say, hey, young man, yes, let's talk. And find out how they did it. That's what I would encourage you to do. That's my little piece of advice there. I saw one hand. I'm going to ask one more question. Yes, ma'am. You have one question. Yes, ma'am.
So my question is, what will it take for you guys to partner with nonprofits like us and others who is going to help you bring these kids to the place they need to be to become financially independent?
Thank you very much. Who wants to take that question? Who wants to take that? Anyone?
And maybe I'll start with that, and thank you for that welcome home. We've really started creating a number of partnerships to address exactly what you've mentioned. We have a collaboration with Google that we started, for example, Howard West, where our computer science students do 2 years undergrad, and then they're part of a collaborative program with Google, where we've sent students, we sent faculty with them. They're actually have been housed on Google's campus because we wanted them to get real-world experience. We started another initiative called Howard Entertainment with Amazon Studios to give students the opportunity to be immersed in the business of entertainment. I think it would be great, and I would like to meet and talk with you about how we can create similar partnerships with nonprofits. Because one of the other things, and I'm sure each of our institutions are doing this, are creating additional internships for students so that they not only have the theoretical knowledge and experience from the classroom, but they also get the practical experience of working in the field that they would like to pursue. So would certainly like to talk a little bit further about that.
What about nonprofits? I am curious. Are there any relationships between university and nonprofits, as the young lady was asking?
Yeah, we have several, but what I've noticed is that there are a lot of nonprofits in DC, and there's almost an industry that has been developed to tend to the wounded. And so the work we're doing in Southeast, for example, it's not only putting our arms around the students that we work with, but it's also trying to organize the nonprofits that we can work with to not only tend to the wounded, but to start to deal with the thing that's causing the wounds in the first place, which is a little different way to see things and do things. But if you have an interest, are you in Southeast? Are you working in Southeast?
Yes, we have partnership with the Blue High School. We just got into doing business in the
Well, you should, get a hold of us, and we'll see if we can get you into the work.
You have graduated and run your own businesses in Maryland, and you don't have to get a job after graduating.
Okay.
And what about George Mason?
No, we have, I cannot even, more than 50 different partnerships with nonprofits. And the idea here, but I think she's touching on a different subject, if you don't mind. Having the relationships with nonprofits is one thing, but that gap between understanding, taking the knowledge that you've learned in the classroom and being able to apply that knowledge to the practical real world is a challenge. And that challenge is resolved by having internships and apprenticeships. We forget how fast knowledge is being created in the world today. We cannot educate a student to have everything that student needs to have in 4 years. And many of the teachings we're giving them are actually obsolete by the time they graduate. And that is real. But what we're finding is more and more needed is that students have some level of job experience and engagement as early as possible while they are working on their degrees, right? They need to be involved at a newspaper. They need to be, if you're in the social work area and the like, you need to be working for these nonprofits. And we need an Apollo level internship initiative in the DMV. I've been calling for one, and all companies do internships, but they're just not doing enough. You need to take the internships and multiply it by a factor of 4, and all of our institutions need to supply as many students as we can the internships, because that's what closes that gap. You're getting that real world in the actual real world and not in the classroom. We can't do it where we sit.
And one of the things I also noticed is that a lot of universities encourage students to do internships their junior or senior year, and that's too late.
It is too late.
It really should be a freshman year
That's
and
exactly right.
sophomore year. By the time junior and senior, it's way too late. I just thought I'd throw that one out there.
Good point.
All right. So we're going to give you, we have to close up. I want to give our panelists like 2 minutes to just sum up anything that you'd like to say to this incredible audience. And we'll start with you, Chris.
Yeah, again, I just want to say thank you for having me here today. Again, on behalf of Dr. Fowler, what we talk about every day is transforming lives, and you all are transforming lives, and all of you all here are here because you want to transform people's lives and think about building a better place for these young black men, black women, Latino students, and I think that is so important because there's so much that is put against them, and so many barriers that are inherently just put in place, and systemic barriers that we are continuing to try to remove, but it takes all of you here. It takes a community in order to do that. And so I think that we need to continue to have these conversations and, again, listen. We need to listen to the young people because they're going to tell us what they need. And oftentimes we talk at them, but we don't take in the lessons that they're trying to teach us as well. And so I look forward to speaking more to these young men, whether it's today or in the future. And I hope you all continue to reach out and build your network and start early because it's those networks that are going to help you down the line as well. So just a pleasure to be here today. So thank you.
Dr. Mason.
Well, I appreciate the opportunity. It's always good to talk to folks who are the future. I would just close by saying, remember that this idea that we call America is a great idea, but it's still an experiment. And we are all part of the process of trying to prove whether or not that experiment is going to be successful. I think one of the things that's important is that we not only know the truth, but also speak truth to power. Because if they don't hear it, then they can't do what's necessary to reach that level of enlightened self-interest that they need to reach in order to make sure that every American can reach their highest level of human potential.
Dr. Washington.
I just want to thank you all for giving me the opportunity to be here and to address all of you. Recognizing that we're looking for partnerships. We're looking for entities to work with, and we're coupling as much as we can with the community to make positive outcomes, not just for these youth, but for all the youth that are not here today. And so I look forward to working with all of you.
Dr. Wutoh.
Good. Certainly want to also thank each of you for being here and for joining us at Howard University. If you just look at what is taking place around the world, and more specifically the things that are taking place in this country, we are at a critical juncture in the history of the world, and there is so much opportunity that is available and will be available to these young men, but that can be stifled. If we don't make the right decisions politically, if we don't make the right decisions economically, if we don't make the right decisions in terms of who can participate in this democracy, who can participate in the opportunities that are available. So to the adults in the room, what they will have available to them is relying on what we do today. And so on their behalf, I certainly want to encourage us to continue to partner together, to continue these conversations, to put pressure on our political leaders, and to really think about the things that we're doing and how it will have an influence, both positive and negative, on their futures. So thank you for joining us.
And thank you all. I also want to be remiss, I would definitely want to, there is a former Alabama State University president in the house, the Reverend Dr. Gwendolyn Boyd is here, former president of Delta Sigma Theta, and a minister at my church, the Ebenezer AME in Fort Washington. Amen. All right. I'd now like to welcome Mr. Edward Kane Jr., Transformation Lead, to share more about the work that VPP+Raise DC is doing to support young men of color in the greater Washington region. Mr. Kane.
Thank you, Keith. Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Again, thank you, Keith. I'm Ed Kane. I'm Transformation Lead at VPP+Raise DC, and on behalf of VPP+Raise DC's board and staff, Keith, first, I wanted to thank you for guiding this amazing conversation. The adjectives I had chosen were vital and thought-provoking, and having actually seen the conversation, I'm not sure that's adequate to describe it. But thank you very much for what you elicited here today, and for the work you do in your day job, which also continues to illuminate and inform and empower. And so we really do appreciate your being a part of this today. Thank you very much. A bit of housekeeping before I move to the next part of the discussion. We do have the Ready for Work program, of which you are a part, nonprofit capacity building, woo woo. And so VPP is really about the work of making those sort of connections. Young people who participate in that program all have an actual work experience. Say more about what we do as we move on with these remarks and get you all out of here. But just want you to know that in terms of those sorts of partnerships, that was the last part of the discussion, that is the work that we are committing ourselves to, the work of making those sort of connections, both for young people and opportunity among partners, among people who lead and make decisions and systems, to folks who are operating at the street level with young people, helping them navigate and hopefully change systems. So that's all part of what we do. If I could continue with sort of the thank yous to Dr. Hayes, Blair, thank you, Mr. President Mason, Dr. Washington, Dr. Wutoh, I really do appreciate all that you did today. We're really grateful that you joined us. We're indebted to you for your powerful stories, your personal and professional truths, and that your insights on critical issues facing boys and men of color, and also the institutions you lead and what you're doing to help shape the future leaders and contributors and creators for this region. So we thank you, we appreciate you, and what you shared with us this morning. We'd also like to thank, this has become my favorite part of this morning. I wanted to pause here and thank and recognize the presence and participation of these young brothers from Statesman College Preparatory Academy for Boys. Gentlemen, you have honored us with your presence, and if I can speak to you and through you on behalf of, as people from my generation said, the brothers who ain't here, it really is your potential and your possibility that focuses our mission, it focuses our purpose, and it animates our work. And we are here because of the possibility of what you can do and what you become. And I was a part of some of those conversations that were described, and I was blown away by the budding archaeologists and high finance managers and business person and everything, entrepreneurs that I heard. It was an interesting point that I think Blair made, that we're talking about stifling our potential. Worse than being scared for them that you might make a wrong step, we are scared for you that some of their steps could be fatal. And so we tend to label as bad things that are fairly standard behavior for entrepreneurs, right? fairly standard behavior. People who try stuff when they don't have the directions, or don't follow the directions, or take a path of their own, or fail, right? We try to grind that out of some of our boys. And some of us had it done to us, and are convinced that perhaps that's the right way, or at least it's a healthy thing. None of your folks are here, and I don't know them, so I'm just going to say, don't listen. Right? Keep dreaming big. Keep reaching forward.
That's right.
Because what you are doing is pushing us to make the world safer for who you are. Right? And so I also want to say to you that another thing that's important for you to recognize and important for us to realize here, this collection of talent and intellectual heft and accomplishment that you see on this stage is truly, truly impressive. But every path from where you are right now to your seat up here doesn't necessarily go through an hallowed academic hall. It doesn't necessarily pass through an Ivy League institution or even HU or the House, right? Some of those paths have a little bit of frustration sprinkled in them. Some of those paths have grabbing a second chance sprinkled in it. Some of those paths are only possible because of praying grandmothers, or because of caring communities, or because of teachers and mentors and coaches that saw through our knucklehead moments, right? And if we're honest, we will say that those things are part of what get us here too, right? And that's also what we want to make sure is in the world that you all are trying to navigate. So that is my thank you to you all for being here today. That is my hope that we are up to what you challenge us to do and bring today. And so for you and the brothers who ain't here, we plan to commit ourselves to keeping working on your behalf. So thank you. For VPP+Raise DC, for over 20 years, has been committed to a mission of leading positive change to make brighter futures for the young people of this region. In service of that mission, we've invested our time and efforts, our financial resources, relationships, and expertise in growing the capacity of nonprofits, community-based organizations, and public and private sector partners to do the critical work of serving now over 57,000 of this region's young people from birth to adulthood. And yet, we understand that even the heroic efforts of some of the region's most highly performing nonprofit organizations are insufficient to root out systemic impediments that disproportionately undermine Black and Latinx boys and young men of color and their ability to thrive. With that understanding, we believe this region confronts a critical inflection point. I believe one of our guests this morning called it a crisis of opportunity, a rigged game. Is another thing we heard today. We can continue in this to be desensitized to poor outcomes for boys and young men of color, despairing and falling back on familiar old tropes, lack of industry or intellect, challenging family circumstances, tropes that are belied by the young men in this audience, the people on this stage, and people that we all know and love and hope for better for. We can do that, or we can look squarely at the systems that have failed to nurture and develop the potential and the talent, and we can commit to closing the gaps in those systems and promoting needed change, and confronting the vestiges of racist policies and practices and assumptions that undermine our young people. Unsurprisingly, disparities in outcomes for boys and young men of color have only exacerbated during the pandemic. Working collaboratively, though, we believe that we can chart a new course. We believe that we can amplify with data the voices of actual boys and young men of color, of Black and Latinx boys, and their families and their communities, and join them to a conversation with the region's systems leaders and decision makers, and illuminate issues and co-design actual solutions that can operate in the communities. We believe the choice is clear. Some might see despair, we see an opportunity. So over the next 3 years, VPP+Raise DC is committed to working with Government of District of Columbia and its partners to advance the My Brother's Keeper Alliance in DC. And I see one of our partners to the Mayor's Office of Community Affairs, Cedric, welcome and thank you. And we look forward to enhancing that partnership. We are going to be working on improving third grade literacy rates for boys of color across the region, including expanding access to high quality early education, early learning in pre-kindergarten in Washington, D.C. and Fairfax County. We are going to be working on improving high school graduation rates for Latinx and Black young men, including reconnecting and or creating the alternate pathways you heard discussed on this stage today for boys and men of color who may have stopped out of school, who might be off track for graduating on time in 4 years, starting in Washington, D.C. and Prince George's County, as well as Fairfax County. And then also we'll be leading a collaborative action network, a collective impact network of people dedicated to moving an agenda of changing systems at the system level to change outcomes for boys and young men of color. We believe that intertwining the power of capacity building investments, something that we've done throughout our history, with cross-sector collaboration, we have a formula to affect long-term systems change. And so as we conclude this morning's celebration of excellence, we issue a call to join and act and collaborate, to get together and roll up our sleeves and unpack the data, to amplify the voices like the voices we've heard here today that come from the community, from the young people themselves, and support the young people, support their families, support the organizations that support and nurture them, to build pathways to excellence for Black and Latinx boys and young men, and remove systemic barriers that seek to undermine them. In the coming weeks and months, we really hope to be engaging many of you in this important collaborative work. For far too long, we've squandered an unacceptable amount of the potential and possibilities of too many Black and Latinx and Latino boys and young men, and we believe at this critical juncture, we must commit ourselves to creating systems that catalyze rather than hamstring the development of their talents. When we help our young boys and young men of color to have the opportunity to participate and contribute, we all prosper. We think about the trillions of dollars are lost to American business because we can't figure that out as a society. Thank you again to our panelists. We appreciate your being here and what you've shared this morning. And for those of you who've only recently discovered VPP+Raise DC as an organization and our work, we encourage you to learn more. Our website is VPPartners at vppartners.org, and you can follow us across social media. On behalf of VPP+Raise DC, thank you all very, very much for joining us today for this really important conversation, and we look forward to seeing what we can accomplish together. Thank you.